It may come as a shock to a lot of people, but one of my favorite actors of all time is Anthony Quinn. So much so that I may even do a top 10 Anthony Quinn performances video. Anyway, so I'm looking through my on-demand for a free film because I ain't got $1 to spare, and I look up Anthony Quinn films, and like 2 of them are free, one of which was this film, The Secret of Santa Vittoria, from 1969, and it was directed by Stanley Kramer. And in the film, Anthony Quinn plays Italo Bombalini. The plot is a simple one. The members of an Italian village, a small Italian village, endeavor to hide their only source of income, 1 million bottles of wine, from the German army during World War II. Anthony Quinn's character, Italo Bombalini, is even simpler. He's a common villager of the small village who, at the start of the film, through a roundabout of events, gets pinned by the corrupt political body as a clown candidate, sort of say a perfect nitwit, commonplace villager, to be an ignorant and manipulatable new mayor. Kind of like a Manchurian candidate. Someone they can control because they look at him as the town idiot or the town clown. And, this happens at the beginning of the film, just before the German army invades. It's an important film, I think, for many reasons, especially during these uncertain times, being locked down and being isolated from each other. And, the humanity of Anthony Quinn is what really shines through. And the humanity of Anthony Quinn is what shines through in a lot of his films, in a lot of his roles, whether he's playing a hero or a villain. And essentially, he carries this film like I would say he carries most films. But then again, he is one of my all-time favorite actors. So I've got some bias there. I think in times like this, films like this are important, especially films that teach us something, and that's what this is. They get, films that get us to reflect on our humanity. Italian villagers of a prideful, if not uncoordinated, small town, coming together behind a struggling, clownish, simpleton leader. But succeeding together nonetheless in challenging the German army. And I'm not going to say what happens in the film. These reviews are non-spoiler reviews, just to give you a quick summary of some of these films that you might not otherwise check out. And maybe these reviews encourage you to check some of them out. But I'm not going to say how the film ends. I'm not going to say what happens in the film. The suspense gets you hooked till the very end because of mainly Anthony Quinn and his performance. But the actor playing the German commander is also a very strong performance, and the actress playing Anthony Quinn's Bombalini's wife is also particularly well cast. The rest of the cast looks like authentic Italian villagers. Some of them might be actors. Some of them look like they're most likely not actors, but people and characters with very interesting faces. There are directors that go that route in casting people that look a certain way, and this has a lot of people that look a certain way. I mean, it's a small Italian village. But The Secret of Santa Vittoria is a film that reminds me why Marvel films are an abomination. And I don't mean an abomination. They're fun every now and then, but they're movies. They're entertainment. They're a fun time. It's not the same as a film, and especially a film with the strength of humanity in the decades-old tradition of storytelling within our society, like caveman pictures on a cave wall, or the stick figure paintings on a cave wall. Films teach us something. When I watch a film, I think about it. When I watch a film, it stays with me. When I watch a film, I reflect on my life, on people I know, people I recognize, someone the film might have reminded me of, maybe someone the film inspires me to be like, or to not be like, in the case of a villain. But in that sense, films have a different weight to them, a different emotion. When I watch Marvel films, when I watch entertainment films, it doesn't have to be Marvel, it could be any entertainment type of film. I got my guilty pleasures: Baywatch, Bad Boys. Lots of films that I love to watch because I could turn my brain off. But a film always makes me think, it makes me feel, it makes me consider, it makes me imagine, it makes me fear, it makes me, do a lot of different things. And the film usually sticks with me. Couple things in this film. I talked about, with my last review on A Bittersweet Life, I talked about the difference between overt, sorry, got distracted. Looks like Taika Waititi is directing a new Star Wars film. Caught my attention, whatever that might mean. But anyway, back to the review. There are films that are overt in their imaging, and there are films that are submissive, and it hits you a little bit. It's like a boxer that gets you with an uppercut, and it's like a boxer that jabbed you and also took a shot at your rib cage, but you didn't quite feel that rib cage because you were feeling the sting on your head. It's a little, you feel it with a delay. This film, I wouldn't say it's in the middle like a Scorsese film, but I would say it alternates between the two types of imprints. And I really, really love that it does that. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, in moments it gives you overt imprints, and in moments it gives you subversive, subtle imprints. And it alternates between the two throughout the film. So it's a very good balance of both. There's a scene where they have to figure out how to get 1 million bottles of wine into a location. Not to give away too much of the plot of the film, but they're trying to hide these bottles of wine from the incoming occupying German army in this little village. And they've only got a certain amount of time. And, their first go about, they're breaking bottles. It's a lot of bottles. There's chaos. It's uncoordinated. And then someone has a bright idea to make it more coordinated. But the way that scene is shot, it's an overt image. It's an image that sticks with you. We talk about a village trying to hide 1 million bottles of wine, and to get coordinated for the incoming invading occupying German army. It's a strong image. It imprints with you. It's probably the most memorable image of the film. One of 3 memorable sequences and images in the film. But the reason why this is an epic example, and this is why everybody should watch films that aren't the highest rated, why you should watch films that maybe look like they're average rated by critics, or sometimes even films that get a bad rating from critics. This one had a good rating, so this doesn't apply to this film, but it wasn't like Anthony Quinn's epic all-time performance. It was one of his good performances, but not one of his performances you might know him for. And in this sequence, the image hits you overtly, but as it hits you overtly, there's an auditory element to that visual image. So the visual image, the visual imprint of the sequence is super overt, hits you, and it stays with you. But at the same time, there's an auditory center to the sequence that makes you that subverts the strong visual element of it and gets you to focus on the subtle auditory element of it. And it does those two things at the same time, and it does them epically well. If you don't watch this film for any other reason, watch it for that sequence that I'm talking about, where they go about hiding their million bottles of wine the second time and see how that sequence plays from a visual overt imprint in your psyche of a small Italian village coordinating together to outsmart and outwit the incoming German army that's going to occupy their village and take their only source of income. And also see at the same time how that sequence plays to a very rhythmic, auditory, subtle imprint at the same time. If nothing else, this film was worth watching for that alone. So, like, the performances are great. The film passes my visual eye test. Certain types of films, I think this film was from the 60s, maybe 69, 67, 68, 69, something like that. I like a lot of films in the 60s. I'm a big fan of Lawrence of Arabia, those VistaVision films that were 3 hours long and had overtures in the middle. Another one from the 60s is the Agony and the Ecstasy, which has an overture and again 3 hours long VistaVision film of Michelangelo painting the 16th chapel, the ceiling. And another one. From I believe it was David Lean who did Lawrence of Arabia. He also did Dr. Zhivago, another 3 hour plus long epic from the 60s with VistaVision. And I love those big films. I love those colors. I love those contrasts. And I love likewise how this is shot. I like how a lot of films in the 60s were shot. And of course, I love how my favorite film of all time, Gone with the Wind, was shot. But also 3 hour plus epic with an overture, and you get the picture. A lot of those films are shot a certain way. So this film, likewise, passes the eye test. And I mentioned there's 3 scenes that are quite memorable. The scene with the wine that gives you an overt visual imprint and an auditory subversive imprint at the same time. And I'm always going to go back to this film for that example. The ending of the film, which leaves you with, a quick shift of, how should I phrase it? And this comes through the character. Like I said, a film can imprint you in different ways, unless I haven't clarified this. But it can imprint you with a visual sequence. It could imprint you with a set piece spectacle. It could imprint you with a character or a line of dialogue. It can imprint you with a lot of things. And an imprint just means you remember it in your psyche. It stays with you when you leave the cinema. It stays with you 2 years down the line when you remembered that film. It stays with you for a lifetime. The films that do it the best imprint you for a lifetime. We've all seen films where the image is so strong, ending of Taxi Driver, that not only you, but general audiences everywhere, people everywhere know those images. That image is imprinted in our society, in our pop culture. It becomes part of our culture. That's how you know you've done it the best. But that imprinting can come from character, it can come from plot, it can come from the script, it can come from the dialogue, it can come from a set piece, it can come from an action scene, the spectacle, the artistic design of a film. It can come from any myriad of ways. The cinematographer, whoever. The second way that it comes is at the ending of the film, like I mentioned, but it comes through a character. It comes through Anthony Quinn's Bambolini. And it comes in a very memorable way, which starts subversive, and at the end of the sequence, ends overtly, which is great. It's great on so many levels as a reflection of the Italian culture. I'm Greek, right next to Italy. Different country, but similar culture. Greeks are very loud. They're very obnoxious. They love food. Very rambunctious. I was always the black sheep in my family because I'm like this, quiet, reserved thinker in the shadows, like shying away from his loud and obnoxious family. For anybody that's seen my Big Fat Greek Wedding, very loud and obnoxious family, and I'm exactly the opposite. I'm very calculating and quiet and reserved and reflective, and And yeah, so Italians, I've known a lot of Italians. I grew up in a very Italian town, an all Italian town probably for the most part, if I have to be honest, but very suburban, white American Italian town. The cultures are very similar, and from the husbands and the wives and the families and the culture in general is very similar. And the film ends in a very reflective way of that culture, in a very profound and again poignant way. And I thought this film was very important, given that we're all isolated, given that we're learning to care a little bit more about each other, given that we're learning to be more reflective of our cultures and situations that can happen to people. And a film where the plot is a small Italian village is trying to protect their meager source of income from a larger and occupying German army who's coming to take it away. And these are simple villagers and a simple newly elected clownish, imbecile, as his wife would say, donkey's ass of a mayor, Bombolini. Which I've known a lot of people like him in real life in my own culture, and it's always great to see a simple-minded but good-hearted character outwit the bad guys, and this is a good example of that. So let's rate it, because I don't want this recording to end improperly, but let's rate it. So let's take out the handy dandy rubric here. Let's see how it does in comparison. I just finished reviewing A Bittersweet Life, and it would be interesting to see under this new rubric, because I've created this 10 category 100-point rubric to balance my reviews of different films, because as I'm rating different films, giving each film 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 1 out of 5, it doesn't create enough difference between them, and it wasn't through the lens of what I find important. These categories are what I find important in a very basic kind of rubric way, and it allows me to weight my reviews. It really allows an average weighting that I think makes these reviews fair, in comparison to how they compare to each of the films that I review. So, number 1 category, the visual eye test. Does it pass my visual eye test? And if it does, where does it fall? Visual eye test, I would give it an 8 out of 10. And then we go to lighting and atmosphere. Lighting and atmosphere, is an interesting category, and I'm going to say this is an 8 out of 10, which if I remember correctly, A Bittersweet Life had a 6 out of 10 in this category. So why does this film get an 8 out of 10? Well, it's not a 9 and it's not a 10 out of 10. It's not like, let's be real, it's not the best visual films I've seen, but there are sequences and moments that are visual in the film. There are moments that are auditory in the film. There are moments that tap into my senses atmospherically in the film that I could almost see myself in this village. Now, maybe it's the culture I grew up with. Maybe it's the different senses that the film touches upon, between the auditoriness and the visualness and the textures of the film and the textures of the performances. And Anthony Quinn's a very grounded actor in a humane kind of way in a lot of his performances, probably better than anybody, I would say, in doing that. But yeah, it gets an 8 out of 10 for lighting and atmosphere, because there are sequences that I remember just for the lighting. Let's put it that way. There are a couple sequences in this film that are memorable to me because of the lighting, like sequences that's what it is. This is a lighting sequence that I like a lot, and that's why I remember it. So it's got a score, an 8 out of 10 in that category. Archetypes that are interesting to me, or characters I am drawn to, 9 out of 10. Bombolini is a character that I will remember, is a character that I will adore, because I like these types of characters, and you don't get too many of these types of characters. The simpleton clown turned leader type of character, and I think this is a good example, and I liked it a lot. Acting performances, 10 out of 10 across the board, and like I said, Anthony Quinn is one of my favorite actors. The woman that plays his wife, well cast. She's very memorable. A lot of the people in the film are very memorable. So 10 out of 10 in terms of acting performances, because I remember them, and I'm going to remember them for a long, long time. It's not, a complicated performance. It's not Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs, although I remember that performance. It's not Daniel Day-Lewis in Gangs of New York, although I remember that performance. But I'm also going to remember Bombolini. I'm going to remember his wife. I'm going to remember the German soldier. I'm going to remember these characters. So, 10 out of 10. Editing and music. Music, I wouldn't say is very memorable. I don't remember the music. But editing, like I mentioned before, is very strong in the image impressions, especially those sequences that have you focus in on the sound of what's going on. So editing, I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. Let's see here. Yep, okay, an 8. Direction, thematic resonance, and timelessness. This is a timeless movie, and it's a movie that if you're watching on a Sunday night, which I think is when I was watching it, going through it, you might be bored by it. If an Italian Village type of film is not your type of thing, hey, you might check out before you get to the end. But I would advise you to get to the end, because I think the end is a memorable film moment. So, and I think the film is well directed. So, direction, thematic resonance, and timelessness, I'm going to give a 9 out of 10. Camera movement, mise-en-scene, somewhere between 7 and an 8. Let's say 7.5. Rewatchability. How often would I rewatch this film? Rewatchability. I'd give it an 8. Screenplay, I would also give an 8. And category number 10, the pacing of the film. Did the film overstay its welcome? Did the film stick the landing? Film sticks the landing. Pacing is A-okay in my book, so that's a 10. And let's add them together. Let's see what we got and how it compares. Let's see how it compares to a bittersweet life. That will be interesting. And okay, hopefully this comes up. My rubric seems to have disappeared on my phone. But hopefully this clears up in a second so I can add up those scores. Bear with me, technical difficulties. Let's see. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, so I've got it here. Bear with me on these technical difficulties. So we've got an 8. Let's see, 1, 2. So 2 8s, a 9 and a 10. Let's see, 2 8s, 9 and 10, 8 and 9, 7.5, 8, 8, and 10. So, what we've got here, let's see, for The Secret of Santa Vittoria from 1969 with Anthony Quinn playing Italo Bombolini, is an 85.5 out of 100. Solid film, solid choice, deceptively charming, deceptively resonant, deceptively and pridefully so, poignant. This is a film I recommend to anybody.